Welcome back, artists. I'm Wyatt Paints. Today, I'm going back to the 90s to make a prop for one of my favorite comedies, The Mask. Now, growing up as a kid, I used to watch Jim Carrey's movies all the time. Ace Ventura, Truman Show, Cable Guy, all of them classic. And none is more iconic than The Mask. Since this classic movie was one of my personal favorites, when I got asked by a client to recreate this prop, I was stoked. And of course I said yes. Now, my client did put an extra challenge for me. He wanted to see if I could recreate the visual effect of when Stanley first finds the mask, that little green shimmer. Look for that at the end. And to quote Stanley, it's time to P-A-R-T. Why? Because I gotta. I'm gonna grab my brushes. Let's get started. Starting with the nose, rough iron is going to give me that deep reddish brown base I'm looking for. Lore-wise, this Loki mask spent a lot of time underwater, and although it's a magic item, some oxidation over the years did occur. So there won't be any crusty rust, but I want a deep patina with subdued verdigris. A rough dry brush makes quick work of this first step. To add some variation to the iron, I mixed in a bit of plate mail. I used a rough dry brush here to get a nice natural patchiness. Unfortunately, because it's so subtle, it didn't pick up well on the camera. Personally, when trying to replicate old weathering, I find that the more subtle the buildup, the older it tends to look. Next is this Verre Oxide that I can't pronounce. Now, this is a prime example of a less is more effect in painting. Using this paint, I tend to give very light coats anywhere I believe water would settle. So in this case, each rivet got a thin ring. And to add a bit more character, I hit a few strokes of more textured areas. You might be tempted to go heavy or double coat with this paint, and I would challenge you to use less and let the faintness be the feature here, and make your viewer really look to be able to see it. Next, Seraphim Sepia Wash came in to tone everything down and marry the layers together. I thinned it down and gave the entire nose piece a full wash. Doing this not only blurs the transition borders for the verdigris and the two metallics, but it also dulls the red in the rough iron very nicely. After everything was dry, I gave it a second coat to really lock everything in. While that second coat dries, I'd like to take this moment to thank my subscribers over on Patreon. Your generosity this month has allowed me to upgrade my sexy nudes with some meat and veg, so nice, very nice. If you'd like to help keep this channel running smooth and me in a healthy supply of sexy nudes, you can find a link to my Patreon in the description below. Also, you can find some Amazon affiliate links to some of the products that I use in this episode. Just know that anything you buy will earn the channel a small commission and a big thank you. If you haven't already, if you like this video, think about hitting that subscribe button and possibly that like button. It's the #1 way to let YouTube know you like what I'm doing. But for now, let's get back to the mask. Moving on to the wood, dark flesh tone is going to serve as my base. This looked like a great time for Bristly to get some work in. Old Bristly has seen better days, but I still always find good work for him to do. I got Bristly for 99 cents off a clearance rack, and for an 8K brush, that's a steal. And I would say I definitely got my money's worth. Next up, rich leather. With this first highlight color, I'm looking to light up the entire face to start to bring out the mottled wood grain. While I do get a bit aggressive with my dry brush, I keep my strokes perpendicular to the wood grain so that I can quickly highlight it. If you happen to slip in some of the cracks, it's not really a big deal, as it will be dressed in a later step. So just keep going and focus on keeping your strokes across the grain. Desert Stone follows as a second highlight. Here, I singled out particular sections to get highlighted. Using the full body unthinned paint here lets me get a light stretchy stroke parallel with the main grain, and it creates a kind of meta grain without much fuss. The trick is to not overdo it, and don't be afraid of your brush getting a little dry in the process. Beltane green will serve as our algae. To create a stain look, I used bristly to flood the surface and then use a paper towel to blot it off. Going in sections while doing this is perfectly fine. If an area gets double stained, it'll just tend to look like it had extra algae. Next, I turned to Argas Earthshade to tone down the wood to my liking. Using my number 2, I loaded up and traced out all of the major cracks between the panels. For me, this is about when it really started to look the part. A lot of product's personality comes out in the shading, and a prop like this is no different. After shading all of the deeper grooves, I left it to dry, as I had one more step of shading in mind. And that step is going to use hardened leather speed paint. Personally, I've had great results using speed paints as recess shaders. To apply it, I'm using this teeny tiny nail art brush I got in a value pack. It's great for these super tight spaces. And with this thicker speed paint, I feel it doesn't get pulled as much as I would with a normal shade, so I have much more control in its application. That way, I can get some very deliberate thin strokes in one go. This was easily the longest step in the process, as I had to carefully go over each portion of the wood, looking for significant wood grain that had been modeled, and then carefully tracing it out with the thinnest line I could manage. If you feel yourself getting tired out, don't be discouraged. Set it down and come back to it after a few minutes. Sometimes it might take more than one session to get through a single step. Now, my client had an extra request. He asked if I could recreate the green shimmer that Stanley sees when he first finds the mask. And I think I can get something close using color shifting paint, but this time I'll have to make my own. Here is some chameleon mica powder I got a few years ago. Like with the most mica powders I use, I'm going to be blowing this out on my airbrush. So I mixed it with some varnish as my medium, a few drops of flow improver, and a healthy squirt of airbrush thinner to get everything moving. Before blowing this stuff through an airbrush, be sure to wear proper protection. You do not want to breathe in mica powder. Also, be sure to backwash your airbrush often, as mica powder likes to settle out pretty fast. As you can see here, I kept the coat very light. If you go too heavy here, the effect gets blown out. You'll have to see how it turns out when we get our final looks. Because for now, this mask is done. It looks pretty good if I say so myself. I would totally buy that this has been underwater for years. What about you all? Is this something you would add to your memorabilia wall? Oh, and as for the inside, well, we can check it out. At certain angles, it's a deep purple and nearly black, while at other angles, it's going to be a vibrant emerald green. I think it worked out. If you'd like to try your hand at this one, you'll find a link to the STL in the description below. But for now, I gotta get back to work. I got a whole lot more projects to do and a lot more videos to edit. So as always, thank you for watching, stay creative, and always enjoy the process.